And we're coming to you live from the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are in the free Odyssey app, good Wednesday morning. Another very interesting day around here yesterday. You had Mike Vrabel getting fired by the Titans. There was rumors about that, but still a lot of shock and surprise throughout the NFL that a guy like that could be fired after the season. Aaron Rodgers, of course, goes on with Pat McAfee and talks about the Kimmel stuff. We will get into that a little bit later in the show, but we also see this story from Paul Schwartz of the New York Post, who had exclusive details on this Wink Martindale Brian Daboll situation, where Brian Daboll ends up firing Wink's right-hand man, the outside linebackers coach, and the linebackers coach brother, who was a defensive assistant. And Wink was really upset about this, cursed out Brian Daboll, called him a mother effer, stormed out of the office, went to the airport, flew down to Sarasota, never told the Giants that he was resigning, but told people close to him that he was resigning, and then that ended up getting to all the football insiders that he had resigned. So right now, unsettled, crazy, two Rams at the top of the mountain, locking horns. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Good morning, Gio. It's funny listening to this particular story because I think it was Jay Glazer who broke it on Fox somewhere in the middle of the season.
Yep.
All right, so when somebody like that, like Glazer, and he's usually spot on, or Adam Schefter, most of the time these guys they're on it and they know exactly what's going on. But when they do report some sort of dysfunction within a building, that's got to rankle the feathers of the head coach, the general manager, and the owner. And I would think that those three gentlemen would sit in a room and say, okay, what is this all about? Or at least the owner would want to know from the coach, what's going on? Why is this out there? And the coach is not stupid. The coach has been an assistant coach for years. He knows exactly what the situation, could be, if they're going to be fired, if they're not going to be fired. He knows exactly what his assistant coaches would be doing. They'd be calling up. They'd be asking and looking for other jobs, possibly setting themselves up for their next stop. Now, I don't know exactly what went on between these guys. All I do know is that, when you fire the right-hand man of your defensive coordinator, there's a reason you do that. He's either ineffective as a coach, he's gone against things that you've asked him to do as the head man, he's been late to meetings. I'm not saying he is. I'm just giving you different reasons as to why things like this happen. Mm-hmm. There could be other things that go on late at night that we don't know about. Maybe it's not fighting over the last piece of pizza. Maybe it's the last beer or something. You just never know, because of the stress that is involved in the job, how these things start manifesting themselves and then get out of control. And then if one of these people did call Jay Glazer and did somehow intimate to Glazer that there was a problem within the staff and basically was laying it at the feet of Brian Daboll's got to react. He's got to do something. And maybe he has sat on it for 5 to 6 weeks to see if he can get his team to win, which, in fact, he did. And he had his team playing hard, and we've given him credit for all of that. We also like Wink. We also like what Wink's defense has done and how they played for him hard. But there was something going on, obviously, that the coach had to make a decision. Now, making the decision that Daboll did by firing Wink's right-hand man, the outside linebacker coach, Wilkins, Daboll had to know that this was going to set Wink off, because he didn't sit down and say, hey, Wink, I got to get rid of this guy. It sounds to me like he just did this on his own.
Yeah, it does, and he did it after the press conference where he said he was firing two coaches, and Thomas McGahee and Bobby Johnson, the O-line coach. And Bobby Johnson, that's significant because that was his guy that he brought from Buffalo. They had been close, and firing him was probably a very difficult thing. So as Paul Schwartz reported, that he goes after that press conference to Wink, brings Wink into the office and tells him, hey, we're firing these two guys that are very close to you, and that's when Wink went crazy. So, yes, it sounds like it wasn't on the table up until that very moment after that press conference. And you're right, because Schwartz also did say, Paul Schwartz of the Post, did say that after that Jay Glazer report, Brian Daboll brought the defensive staff in and said, okay, what's going on? If anybody's got a problem, let's lay it out there now. Let's get through this, because obviously this is getting out and someone wants this to be a story, so let's handle it right now.
And by the way, if in fact that part of that story is true, good for Brian Daboll for doing that.
Yeah.
Good for him bringing the guys in and saying, because he seems like to be a pretty upfront guy. Now, this could be a backstabbing business. Mm-hmm. There's insecurity all over the 32 teams and their coaching staffs, because you never know what the billionaire owner is going to do. And, we've seen already 5 or 6 times where you scratch your head as to what's happening with the organization when it's going down. But again, we don't know the internal reasons as to why. And I think this, I hope that, I don't think this is repairable. I really don't. I think that if Wink is telling people he resigned and then took off to Sarasota, that's ridiculous. Maybe he just needed a place to cool down. Maybe that's where his second home is, and maybe he just needed to get out of New York. But headstrong coaches, this will happen. And, it really, unfortunately, the perception is dysfunction on one hand. On the other hand, it shows me that Brian Daboll is large and in charge. He's not going to be pushed around. Nobody's going to tell him what to do. And, he's been waiting a long, long time to become a head coach of a football team. And, he's got to be the one that handles it and runs it and makes the decisions, because he's the one that's facing the media every goddamn day and also has to deal with the general manager and the owner.
Right, sure. And these insiders, they know what they're doing. They know where to go for information. And I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of the 2 Wilkins that got fired, that Brian Daboll was able to sniff out that they were the guys that had gone to Jay Glazer and told him it was a problem. It's either that or Wink or one of Wink's guys. He's like, I can't have this. It's not working. We're grinding against one another, and I got respect for Wink, but this is not going to happen. And at some point, someone needs to establish dominance, and dominance has to come from the head coach. So I give credit to Brian Daboll. You don't want to lose Wink Martindale, but if it's not working, it's not working. These guys can be great, and they could be good together like they have been. They could be great separately, but maybe it just doesn't jive. Maybe the personalities just don't jive in the way that this could be a long-term relationship.
There were games early on where Wink's defense wasn't up to snuff, wasn't really playing that well. And remember, this is the defense that also traded Leonard Williams in the middle of the season. And it was like a give-up point, but the defense never gave up. Defense played tough. They played hard. They got after people, and Wink loves the blitz, and he got after opposing quarterbacks, and he's one of the reasons why the Giants had a modicum of success this year, I'm sure. I think that they would like to retool some of the things going on around that defense. But, at the end of the day, there's one head man, and there can only be one head man. And if Wink wants to be a head coach somewhere else, then lo and behold, go try to be a head coach somewhere else. And then you run the show, and then you tell the offense what you want. If the head coach is offensive minded, and he needs a defense that's going to be supportive and not give up, 50-yard touchdown passes to Dak Prescott, back to back to back, then he's going to say something to that defensive coordinator and say, what the hell are we doing? Or if there is a particular position on the defense that continues to make the same mistake week in and week out, then there is a problem with the coaching. Then that's where, now all of a sudden you as a head coach realize that why are the same guys making the same mistakes? And, they're good enough to be here, and if they just do what they're supposed to do and be taught and what they're taught to do, then they should be, they should be doing better. But then there's the also, this is the bad thing. There's somebody in that building calling Jay Glazer.
Yep.
Somebody. And I don't know who it is, but Brian Daboll knows who it is. He knows exactly who it is.
And it could be a player, too. It doesn't have to be someone who was close with Wink on the staff.
Oh, no, this is a coaching staff thing.
Yeah, you think so?
I think this is a 100% coaching staff thing. And, and smart insiders like Glazer, Jonathan Jones, our guy at CBS, they have their contacts, and I see Jonathan working it all the time. One of the things that happened 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, this happened. It didn't happen at one of these 2 teams here, but it was a team in the NFL, and I do know this, that basically, asked for David Tepper's contact information, and he was a staff member of a team that was right in the middle of the season. So he's already thinking that he wants to go get the job down in Carolina. So this kind of crap happens all over the place. And, they also, I always wonder, why do you have so many goddamn coaches? Why do you need 25 coaches?
You don't.
Now Mike Tomlin, kind of alluded to the fact that, coaches are teachers, and certain players do need individual teaching, coaching, and they need a lot of individual time to give them an understanding of what's trying to be done. I know I've worked with players when I played above the coaches to help them understand what I'm expecting of them on the field. But I think the more coaches you have, the more problems you create with situations like this. I would keep my coaching staff to a minimum, maybe have a support staff, but then you got to watch the support staff. You don't know who they're talking to.
Now, there is a money aspect with this with Wink Martindale, and I'm sure he'd get another job right away, and it wouldn't be an issue for him. But if he resigns officially to the Giants, which he has not done yet, then that means, because he was under contract, that means that he does not get his money. So if he wanted to, let's say he were fired and wanted to take a year off, he would still get his money. But if he resigns and takes a year off, he would not get his money.
This is exactly what Sam Weish went through my final year with Sam in 1991, Christmas time. Sam Weish was let go by the Bengals. No, Sam Weish resigned from the Bengals. No, Sam Weish was let go from the Bengals. No, Sam Weish resigned from the Bengals. I mean, it was the three-ring circus. And still to this day, I don't know what happened. I don't know if he got fired or they let him go. All I know is he went in there. We didn't have a great year in 91. And, he wanted certain things. They weren't willing to give him the things that he wanted. And the next thing you know, he's out the door and he doesn't have the job as the head coach of the Bengals. And even to this day, I even asked Sam late in his life, like, what the F happened? And he still doesn't really know what happened. But he was a little quirky, and Mike Brown was a little quirky, the owner of the Bengals. And I still, to this day, have no idea whether he was fired or he resigned.
Yeah, well, Wink Martindale's going to have to figure that out, and it doesn't sound like the Giants are going to sit there and fire him at this point, because they would have done that already. Now, maybe they will after they talk to him. Maybe they're going to let him calm down a little bit. He gets down to Sarasota. He relaxes. He clears his head. These guys talk, and they figure something out. But it doesn't seem to me like this is going to be a cool-down period, then all of a sudden Wink Martindale comes back to the Giants.
Now, this is a crazy situation. And then you start looking at the potential replacements and who does Brian Daboll have an affinity for. I think, didn't they try to keep Patrick Graham?
Yeah,
I felt like they tried to keep him. He's obviously going to be free because of what's going on. I think out now, Las Vegas, is it? Where is he now? Las Vegas or Chargers?
Somewhere.
He's somewhere out
there.
Well,
Leslie Frasier is a guy who hasn't been coaching and was with Brian Daboll at Buffalo.
Yeah, you remember what happened at the end of that Kansas City playoff game.
Yeah, I understand. But
yeah, you remember we asked Brian Daboll about that, and he didn't want to talk about it.
That is true. He didn't want to talk about it.
That was his first question as head coach of the New York Giants.
From you, yes.
Yeah, from me.
That's right. Yes,
because I really wanted to know what the hell happened.
Yeah. Well, they ended up losing that game, and that was brutal, and Leslie Frazier sort of disappeared into the mist after that and has not been seen or heard from since. But he's a name that was popping up yesterday because of this Wink situation. But hey, he's still the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants as we sit here right now, because he's not officially resigned from the Giants.
You could actually fire him. Again, I don't know all the contractual details with all these coaches and these teams, but if you go in there and you just lay into the head coach like the way he supposedly led into the head coach, you could fire him for conduct detrimental to the team. Yeah, that's your boss. You don't go in there screaming at your boss.
I understand, but I'm sure that the Giants are not going to try to screw him out of his money
No, because they know he'll get another job, and they'll have offset language in it anyway. So it doesn't – at the end of the day, they need to clear this up, and they got to get this moving, and they got to get – Joe Shane has got to get going on this team. He's got to start figuring out who the hell his quarterback's going to be. Who are they going to draft? Who are they going to sign in free agency? Who are they going to keep on their own team that is up for free agency? There's a million things going on right now, and the last thing that they need is turmoil in the coaching staff, which is what they have right at the moment.
Yeah, this is what happens when you get two type A personalities like this and things aren't going well. You didn't hear a thing about their relationship last year when they were overachieving, went to the playoffs, won a playoff game, faced the Eagles in the divisionals. Not a thing. But this year was different. This was a bad year. It was 6-11. There was a lot of adversity. And I'm sure that The defense could be looking at the offense going, my God, this is brutal, even though there were so many injuries at the quarterback position. That we're not playing all that bad second half of the season. We still can't win any games here. And then there's some tension between both sides of the ball. But this is now beyond repair, and they got to figure it out. And the longer that this now continues, it's going to be a story like something has to happen today now, in my opinion, because the longer this goes on, and Wink's in Sarasota, nobody's saying anything. He hasn't resigned yet, and all of this is just going to swirl and swirl and swirl. It's only Wednesday. We could be talking about this on Friday going into Wild Card Weekend.
But what really does suck is that this is the second year of Brian Daboll. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have this dysfunction. And this is what happens when you hire high-strung coaches, especially older coaches. I mean, Wink Martindale's got a lot of Rex Ryan in him. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's a A-type personality. He's an in-your-face defensive guy. The guys play for him. He's going to get them going the right way. And sometimes that also becomes a little bit of a hindrance for the head coach. I mean, you don't want one of your coordinators to be more, not I say popular, but, a little bit more listened to than maybe what you're doing. Like maybe you wanted certain things happening on defense, and the coaching staff and the defense was not listening to you because – you're a so-called offensive coach. We'll handle this. Oh, wait a minute. You're going to handle this? When I want, and this is funny because I was talking to Coach Cower about this. Coach Cower was a defensive head coach, and he would tell his offensive coordinators, hey, this is what I want, and this is what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, you're going to get fired. You got to grab hold of that coaching staff, and they got to be working for you and your vision. That's the way it's got to be. You can't have it any other way. That's why I hate when you hire a lesser-known head coach and then you bring in a defensive coordinator that's been a head coach somewhere else, or a lesser-known defensive coach who hires an offensive coordinator who's been a head coach somewhere else.
Well, I'll give you an example, and I don't remember. Do you remember if this was purely Brian Daboll's hire or Wink Martindale was available and it just seemed like it would work, and maybe John Mara got involved to get Wink there? Because I think back to the Greg Williams-Adam Gase thing. Now, Brian Daboll is not Adam Gase. But remember, that was an arranged marriage.
Yeah, that was not good.
They did not. Adam Gase did not want Greg Williams. Now, do you remember when Wink got hired?
I think the job was offered to Patrick Graham, and then he turned it down and left.
Yeah,
and he was here. Everybody seemed to like him. The players liked him. They had reasonably good defenses, and then he left, and then they went for Wink Martindale because he essentially left the Baltimore Ravens because that Mike McDonald took over.
Yeah.
And Mike McDonald was a guy who was on the Ravens staff, went to Michigan to work under Jim Harbaugh, and then came back from Michigan to the Ravens, and then that's when Wink Martindale was released from the Ravens or resigned from the Ravens, whatever happened there.
Yeah, so I'd like to know the background of that. If that was Wink Martindale's out there, this guy's got a great reputation, and John Mara goes, we should put him on the staff. I'd love to have him on the staff. And then it's like a quick meeting, Brian Daboll, Wink Martindale. Yeah, sure, this will work fine. Or Brian Dable's like, I know Wink. He'll be great. I always wanted to work with him. I want to hire Wink Martindale.
I'm sure they had some sort of relationship somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And these are two old school throwback coaches that I'm sure appreciated each other, working with each other, but then butted heads over whatever happened in certain games. There's probably about 4 or 5 games where Brian Daboll stuck his nose into the defensive room or defensive game planning and said, hey, this is what I want. You got to stop doing this.
Yeah. And the beat goes on. We'll see what happens. I'd love to know where Wink Martindale is right now in Sarasota, what he's doing, what he's drinking, where he's staying. I want to know everything about this Wink Martindale Sarasota excursion.